In the last segment, I explored the typologies of folk religious practices in South Asia. I also argued that folk religious practices often seamlessly merge with the more established religions, and it is very often difficult to distinguish among the two. In fact, the devotees of one kind of tradition do not necessarily practice traditions in exclusion. In this segment, I am going to discuss how folk religious traditions expand and how the relationships between folk and formal religious tradition emerges. In the last segment, we saw how veneration practices in communities can range from intimate ancestor worship to worship of avatars that are stated to be closely related to communities who worship them. In this segment, I will trace how the transition from little to great tradition takes place and what it means for social location of the communities that worship these deities. According to Stuart Blackburn, when the folk traditions refer to ancestors with who communities can trace direct relationships, they remain limited to a smaller geographical area. As the tradition expands, narratives, deities, and concerns of other groups also start becoming part of the tradition, allowing it to expand beyond the kin-based devotees. In doing so, folk religions also move towards more formalized structure of religion that on the one hand associates itself with the local folk cults and on the other hand associates itself with the larger formalized traditions. In this pattern of expansion of folk religions, we can witness newer plot lines being added to main structure of the life of the deity. In this manner, the folk deity rises from being just a local ancestor to a deity revered by larger populations with associations with more universally accepted deities. I will use the narrative of Pabuji, a deity worshipped by camel herding community of Raikas in Rajasthan, to illustrate the process. Pabuji is one of the ancestor deities that we explored in the first segment. He is believed to have sacrificed his own life while protecting cows of a herding woman and was deified in this process. However, the narrative of Pabuji also links him to the Hindu epic Ramayana, where he is seen as an incarnation of Lakshmana, the brother of Rama, the hero of Ramayana, and an avatara of Vishnu, the Hindu deity of preservation of life. Pabuji's images as horse rider are often present in sacred groves and pastures frequented by the Raikas. However, among other communities that venerate Pabuji are Rajputs who claim a kinship from him through the descent, and Bhils who also claim an association with him. Each one of these communities lays an intimate claim on him. Rajputs claim that Pabuji was a Rajput by birth and was born in a village Kolu, where there is a temple dedicated to him. Raikas claim that Pabuji brought red-brown she-camels for them from Lanka and gave them the task of herding camels, because of which he defined their identity as camel herders, and thus they venerate him. Bhil warriors joined him when nobody else was willing to be in his army and fought in many battles, including the climactic battle where he was killed or ascended to heaven, depending upon the version. Bhils also claim that when Pabuji was ascending to heaven, he dropped his head cloth, which was marked with his blood. This cloth magically became inscribed with Pabuji's story in the form of a visual narrative called the Fad. Pabuji's story in its entirety was revealed to the Bhils, who now sing his story along with the inscribed Fad and act as his priests. The Raikas, who are his primary devotees, sing his narrative in the form of communal singing called Jhodawa, or commission the Bhil Bhopas or priests to come and perform the singing of the Fad as a ritual over several nights. The singing of the entire narrative can take several nights and is accompanied by ritual lighting of oil lamps and distribution of prasad. The Bhopas, who sing in pairs, either a male-male pair or a man and his wife, are given ritual offering as well as commissioned to perform the Fad, or Fadvachan as it is called. Fadvachan is not seen as an entertaining performance but ritual worship of a deity that provides meaning to the existence of both Bhil Bhopas as well as Raika devotees, both communities being among the lowest rungs of caste hierarchy in Rajasthan. Apart from being a deity for Bhils and Raikas, Pabuji is also considered to be an incarnation of Lakshmana, who has to return to earth to repay a debt that he owed to Ravana, the villain of Ramayana, and his sister Shurpanakha, who he had disfigured. It is the movement from a local cattle protecting deity to an avatara that tells us about how folk traditions and deities transition between social locations. The folk tradition of Pabuji is the saga of a Rajasthani Rajput hero who died while protecting cows of a Charani cattle herder. Rajasthan's sacred landscape is dotted with devotees or hero stones dedicated to slain heroes who are worshipped as village deities and are seen as protectors of cattle and village communities. Among such deities, Pabuji holds a very important place, and his shrines, with his image as horse rider, sometimes accompanied by his fellow warriors, are found to be established in homes, grazing grounds, and sacred groves. Pabuji's narrative belongs to standard tales of cattle protection in arid zone of Rajasthan, where cattle are an important resource. There is little clarity on the historical Pabuji. There may have existed a heroic cattle protector of the name to whom actions of many such heroes were attributed as his cult grew. The earliest texts pertaining to Pabuji's heroic feats, Pabujira Chand, can be traced to the second half of the 16th century. Following this, several other texts like Pabujira Duha and Pabu Prakas were composed, and some recensions have been preserved in various archival collections across Rajasthan. It would be pertinent here to mention that such texts were composed by Charans, a bardic community associated with genres of heroic and panegyric poetry in medieval Rajasthan. Mohta Nainsi, a late 17th century chronicler, also added Pabujiri Baat to his compendium of Rajput history. In recent years, several hagiographical texts as well as commentaries have been locally published in Hindi and Marwari. Oral narratives of Pabuji vary, depending upon the singers, who sometimes refer to the text but often have their own compositions and explanations. There is also a wide selection of songs, video enactments, etc. that is available on the internet. Pabuji is believed to have been born to a Rathor Rajput father and a mother who is stated to be an Apsara or a heavenly nymph. Pabuji's father, Dhandal Rathor, met a nymph in the forest and married her on the condition that she would be given a separate palace where he would not come without her permission. Soon, 2 children were born of this marriage, Pabuji and his sister Sonabai. One day, burning with curiosity about the palace, Dhandal Rathor went to the palace of his wife and found her in the shape of a tigress who was suckling Pabuji. On finding that her condition had been breached, the nymph disappeared, leaving Pabuji and his sister to be raised by her co-wife. He began to display miraculous characteristics even as a young boy. A group of Bhil archers who had been exiled from their own village met him and, impressed with his miracles, decided that he was not an ordinary mortal and decided to become his followers. Being the younger son of a second wife, Pabuji had to venture out in search of livelihood early on. For this purpose, he required a mare, which he acquired from a Charani cattle and horse trader called Deval, offering his protection to her herds in return. The narrative states that this mare was no one else but his nymph mother, who returned to aid him. The gift of mare led to enmity among Pabuji and his kin, particularly his brother-in-law Jindrao Khichi, who too had his sights on the same mare. The enmity between Pabuji and Jindrao Khichi came to a head when the latter abducted the herds of Charani Deval when Pabuji was away to get married. Upon hearing about the attack on Charani Deval's herds, Pabuji left the marital pavilion with rituals incomplete and came to defend the herds. In the ensuing battle, he almost defeats Jindrao, though does not kill him, as Jindrao is his sister's husband. Soon enough, Jindrao's reinforcements arrive and Pabuji is finally killed in climactic moments. In the narration of the Fard, Pabuji is depicted as ascending to heaven in a palanquin, thus escaping a human death. Pabuji's elder brother is also killed in the battle, and his pregnant wife commits sati after cutting open her belly to give birth to a son. This son becomes a Nath ascetic called Roopnath, and on coming to know about the death of his father and his uncle, kills Jindrao Khichi in an act of revenge. In this form, the narrative of Pabuji remains that of a medieval cattle protecting hero, a trope that was so popular that it appears in the narrative of a Muslim saint believed to have been the nephew of Muslim conqueror Shihabuddin Gori. However, what adds complexity to Pabuji's narrative is the claim that Pabuji was not just a Rajput Bhomia or Jujhar, but that he was a hero incarnate. He was incarnation of Lakshman, the brother of Rama, the avatar of Vishnu, and a deeply venerated deity of the Hindu pantheon. As the narrative goes, in the Ramayana, when it appeared that Ravana, who had abducted Rama's wife Sita and with whom Rama and Lakshmana were fighting a battle, was undefeatable, Lakshmana took the form of Ravana's wife and ferreted out the secret of his death from him. Ravana had been promised immortality in the form of 10 heads, and his life was guarded by a pot of nectar of life in his belly. It is only by deceit that Lakshmana was able to get his secret, thus leading to Rama winning the battle with Ravana by deceit. According to Blackburn, it is immortality and deceit that creates loose ends that are then often used to join folk traditions with larger traditions. In Pabuji's narrative, Ravana is born as Jindarao Khichi to be able to kill Pabuji by deceit and complete the cycle that was initiated in the Ramayana. Thus, in the Pabuji narrative, even though Pabuji has nearly defeated Jindarao, he cannot kill him, as the latter is his sister's husband. On the other hand, Jindarao manages to call his uncle along with the force that kills Pabuji, thus allowing Pabuji to repay a debt that he owed from a previous life. In Pabuji's narrative, this loose end is provided in the form of yet another event, that is, the proposition made by Ravana's sister Shurpanakha to Rama and Lakshmana. Rama refused to marry her as he had vowed never to marry again. Lakshmana too refused to marry her and instead disfigured her. According to some tellings of Ramayana, Lakshmana promised Shurpanakha that she would become his wife in the next birth. Now in Pabuji's narrative, while Lakshmana is born as Pabuji, Ravana is born as Jindarao Khichi, Shurpanakha is born as Pulvati, the woman who Pabuji marries and leaves in the nuptial pavilion. Thus he fulfills his promise to marry her, but never consummates the marriage, thus remaining true to his position as Lakshmana, the ascetic warrior. The associations with Ramayana allow Pabuji to not merely remain a local warrior hero, but allow him to expand beyond his networks of mortal associations and kinship and be proclaimed a deity. A number of other factors allow him to make this transition. Historian Janet Camphorst offers some insights into the identity of Pabuji's mother. It is clear from the narrative that Pabuji's father met her in the forest and she could have been a member of forest-dwelling tribe, perhaps a Bhil woman. However, the narrative uses the term Apsara for her, which means a heavenly nymph, a trope very often employed to obscure the identity of women. According to Camphorst, the shift from a tribal woman to a heavenly nymph may have been necessitated by the social mobility among Rajputs, who increasingly became endogamous and thus insisted on parentage that was Rajput on both sides. Thus, the trope of nymph allows Pabuji a heavenly status, thus silencing the question of parentage. On the other hand, it also allows him a birth which is no longer an ordinary human birth. He is suckled by a nymph who can shapeshift into a tigress and a mare. We see the trope of extraordinary birth repeat itself in many traditions, including Ramayana, where heroes are born after their mothers consume consecrated food. In the Mahabharata, the heroes are born because of the ability of their mothers to invoke gods and thus are not ordinary mortals. In other folk traditions like Ponnar Shankar, heroes are born after long piety practiced by the mother and are born fully formed. In another tradition from Rajasthan, the deity Dev Narayan is born on top of a lotus. Thus, birth stories of these deities point towards fundamental question regarding birth that Levi-Strauss says confronts human race. That is, are we born of one or of two? Being born of one raises Pabuji and other deities to the level of gods. In the case of Pabuji and various other heroes, the absence of human death further takes away the human status. Pabuji does not die like ordinary human beings. He ascends to heaven in a palanquin after having fulfilled his duties remaining from the last birth. In fact, most of such deities die young, mostly around the age of 16, the age at which the young hero of the epic Mahabharata, Abhimanyu, is supposed to have died. Pabuji's deification takes place in many other ways. In one part of his narrative, he decides to gift red-brown she-camels to his niece, which are only found in Lanka. He sends his aide, a Raika named Harmal, to Lanka to find out about the camels. Harmal finds the camels and brands them in the name of Pabuji, who then brings them over the ocean into Rajasthan. Here, he gives half the camels to his niece and the other half to the Raikas, thus making them camel herders. Raikas consider Pabuji to be their originator in that sense, that he created them as camel herders. For Bhils, there are several layers of associations. He could have been their ancestor through his mother. By fighting along with them, they gained the status of warriors just like the Rajputs. In fact, one of the Bhil warriors even feeds his entrails to the birds of prey in true Rajput fashion. Bhil warriors and Harmal Raika find space in the Pabuji shrines and fards and are venerated along with Pabuji. Thus, along with Pabuji, it is others who also become semi-divine and provide venerative context for their communities for centuries to come. The presence of Charani goddess Deval also plays an important role in Pabuji's deification. In various moments of the narrative, when Pabuji prevaricates and appears to live his human destiny, for example, by marrying, the Charani Deval firmly shifts him towards his divine destiny. In the climactic battle, when Pabuji has found all the cattle, she makes him dig a well which is blocked by a pir and then go and look for a one-eyed calf that is hidden in an opium box, thus giving time to Jindrao Khichi to amass more troops. Charani goddesses are believed to ensure that Rajputs stick to the righteous path, which is what Deval appears to be doing here. Moreover, she acquires the form of a devastating goddess in the final battle, annihilating armies to ensure that they ascend to heaven. In several folk traditions, we find goddesses playing similar roles. According to Stuart Blackburn, in traditions like Pabuji, the process of deification starts only after the death of the hero. Pabuji could have been a cattle-protecting bhomia like many others, or could have been the amalgamation of several such heroes. On his death, he, like many others, would have been venerated as an ancestor. However, as his tradition became stronger among multiple communities, the process of his deification started. In the process of deification after death, supernatural birth and death are the first stages that set the dead hero apart from the ordinary men. Heroes who are neither born like ordinary mortals nor die like ones are likely to be freed from the stage of ancestor worship, which ties them only to their own communities. The heroes thus liberated from their kin can be venerated by larger groups. By associating heroes to avataric traditions, by employing loose ends in the narrative, the hero finds greater acceptance and greater explanation for their actions. They are born only to fulfill the deeds left unfinished in their past as avatars, and after having fulfilled them, they can ascend to their rightful place. By associating with avataric traditions belonging to formal religious pantheon, a bridge is created between folk religious practices and established religions. Devotees no longer need to choose, but can see one as the outcome of the other. This allows for greater dissemination of folk traditions as well as their acceptance among people who might not be originally associated with the narrative. So, in this manner, a visit to a Pabuji temple can be a visit to a Lakshmana temple, and a visit to a Charani goddess temple is a visit to a goddess shrine. And in this manner, the gaps between folk and formal religion is bridged.